This is a game about slaying a princess. It's a love story. It's a visual novel that kills. And it also can be a game about being a trans person in this volatile world. Hear me out. Trans people, even when hurt and even when burned, persist. If we are deeply injured, for survival, we need to adapt into something defensive. If we are loved and cared for, we can reflect that easier onto other people. Slay the Princess is a story about persistence, growth, and being trans. To be clear, this video is going to touch on topics generally like trans death, pain, being closeted, and general transphobia. I'll be delicate with these topics, but if you are not able to handle that, come back to the next video, okay? However, this has a good ending, I promise. Even through all the pain, we all deserve a good ending. I won't entirely spoil the ending, as I want you to play it out for yourself. However, inevitably, there will be spoilers. We start off in the woods with two characters, the hero and the narrator. In my interpretation, the narrator is antagonistic to the princess, and that could be analogous to the trans experience of oppression. He hammers in on every reset that the end of the world will occur if she is freed. And I believe the basement is a metaphor for being in the closet. He has absolutely no evidence for this notion. The common hateful rhetoric from transphobes is that trans people in general come out and are themselves, then society would collapse. For example, this is tied to the trans panic excuse, where men will pretend they are tricked into having sex with a trans person to inflict violence on them. I bring this up because Slay the Princess frequently touches on domestic violence as a theme of the story. You could treat her well, love her, and then the narrator will still stab her in the back. He is the ever-present voice in some men's heads that push them to demean trans people, even when they are in relationships with them. Coming back to the narrative though, we also have the hero in our head. I posit that the hero is the prototypical average decent guy, not knowing much about trans folk, still has a good heart, and wants to do right by her. In the game, you're able to continually question the narrator, which aids in the hero's suspicion of this murder setup. If you come into the basement without the knife, the first thing he says to her face is that she's beautiful. How can she harm anyone? I honestly find this very sweet, trans metaphor or not. However, it is a bit surface level, especially considering how she morphs into scarier forms later on. He has no idea what she's capable of. Her personality is very different than if you did have a weapon. This blade is a turning point in the story, the first option that truly matters. If you try to help her with the knife to break her chains, she bites off her own arm without a second thought to shed her chains with your help. This is really weird. The hero, the narrator, and the player concur. However, looking at this through the trans lens, I could see why she did this and why her reaction was so nonchalant. If we're still seeing the basement as a metaphor for being closeted, it's much more reasonable for her to take extreme measures to escape it. When I was very much repressed, all it really took was a person, trans or not, to give me the accepting kindness that I craved to come out to them. In my experience, coming out of the closet lost me friends, but it also freed me. I had to sacrifice some people and opportunities to move forward, and I interpret this action as doing just that. Honestly, the euphoria of coming out and people being kind to me ultimately made it so much more worth it. Obviously, this is not everyone's experience, but I find it to be really relatable. The way the narrator and hero find it odd was interesting too. I never really thought about what the cis experience of seeing a trans person sacrifice so much to escape the closet would be. I wonder if it's a similar confusion. I know I have some cisgender subscribers, let me know what you think. Anyways, we don't make it far when the knife from upstairs clatters to the floor. It's fairly implied that the narrator orchestrated that, however, it's left ambiguous. In the end, the narrator tries to slay the princess, and she ends up killing us in self-defense. This furthers the narrative I'm making where the narrator is a stand-in for a transphobe. I won't get too in-depth on this part since the video is already pretty sad, but the rhetoric of trans people being a threat to the quote-unquote outside world does kill us, either slowly or quickly. Wow, holy shit, that was a lot. Just checking in. Make sure to take a breather for this one. Go pause the video and get some water and a snack. I'll be here when you're ready. Coming back to this, we now have a new voice in our repertoire. His name is fittingly Smitten, and he is obsessed with the princess. Now, initially I thought Smitten was analogous to something of a chaser. If you didn't know, a chaser is a cisgender person who pursues trans people in a fetishistic and dehumanizing way. Behavior like keeping the relationship with a trans person secret, constantly disregarding physical and emotional boundaries, and only seeing the trans person and not their personality. However, it's more complicated than I first thought. A large aspect of this archetype is the internal shame that cis people feel for being attracted to a trans person. Like I said before, it's common to hide away a trans partner out of personal shame and inner transphobia. However, Smitten does not have that urge. This phenomenon is primarily directed towards trans women, which I did want to note. He constantly screams from the rooftops how much he loves and adores her. The princess reciprocates. It can be pretty sweet, honestly. That is, until I kill the princess. I wanted to see what would happen to Smitten if I did this. But seeing her on the ground injured and saying, "I'm sorry, did I do something wrong?" It was really heartbreaking. In the next route, Smitten is not okay. The palpable emotions like anger and despair coming from him are hard to ignore, which is another reason I don't think he's exactly a chaser. He ends up dying from self-inflicted wounds out of care for the princess. He isn't really fetishizing her in this way. His love is just very passionate. He also is very much still enamored with her when she's a bundle of spikes and not a conventionally attractive princess, and I find that really cool and a testament to his actual character. However, he does display some tendencies like focusing on her beauty constantly and being incurious about her interests. I do feel like that is analogous to some cis people treating trans women more as an object of adoration rather than a full person. I believe he's not exactly a chaser. However, he's not exactly a staunch trans ally either. Now, for the queen of the show, Miss Princess herself. Before we dive further, I hope you guys understand that my intention is to not take the source material as a literal experience of all trans people. This is fundamentally a horror story about murder and dying, which isn't the case for many trans people. We are more likely to be the victims of hate crimes, not really the perpetrator. With that out of the way, don't you just want to go apeshit sometimes? After so many times of being beaten down, sometimes literally, by either a cis person or overall structural prejudice, it's easy to let it go to your head. This frustration is not only justified, but it also can be vindictive. Let's talk about that. Lashing out doesn't really serve our community. Sure, we aren't murdering people, but after so much hateful rhetoric, it's easy to become bitter and, yes, vindictive. In one of her forms, the arms race, She is transformed into spikes and blades almost completely. Her entire form is threatening, and she kills you almost immediately. However, in this instance, you kind of did this yourself. You can only achieve this ending because you tried to kill the previous princess, and in turn, she kills you now. Initially, I took the Smitten route for the first time, but then I killed her on the second. This made her burned, and beyond reason. It's... Well, I don't condone murder, obviously. I do get it to some extent. When all you know is pain and grief, you may start to internalize it and lash out at other people. I've seen trans people in my life become cold over time because of being constantly under transphobic attacks. So, unfortunately, we have to talk a bit about passing and 4chan. This may be a weird turn for some of you, however, it may also be an expected one for others. The concept of passing and being stealth is subjective and ultimately tied to a cis perspective. It basically entails being so integrated and visually indistinguishable from a cis person that no one can tell you're trans. This is not inherently a bad thing. Many people pass or are stealth as their gender and are completely normal about it. However, I'd be lying if I said that all trans people are normal about it. There are so many threads and pages of fellow trans people asking if they pass and being torn down by their peers. I see this hurt in the princess. I see her tearing her skin apart and lunging at her aggressor. While these threads are internal and mostly trans people infighting, it still is that same hurt. But despite all these threads, the hurt, the armor we build up to some people, we still come in without the knife. Finally, I'd like to touch on the aspect of grace from cis people to trans people. The first real action you take in the game is to grab the knife or come unarmed, like we said earlier. This is a really potent choice, and one that changes the trajectory of the route permanently. As I discussed earlier, if you take the blade, the princess comes in ready to fight. However, if you don't take it, the princess is genuine and open. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you expect a person to be a monster, you may just get one. Every playthrough, you end up in the cold space where the princess is an angelic being. She continually notes that she is not a person, but she does hold a variety of perspectives that you have killed. She isn't mad at you, quite the contrary. She asks you to bring her more. I honestly do not know what to make of this. Trans metaphor or not, initially I interpreted her as a community of trans people, but I don't think that's a good reading. Killing the princess in this metaphor for trans identity isn't good, in my opinion. So it'd be a contrary muddled mess once you mix this part of the plot like this with a trans metaphor. For this aspect, I had to reel it back and set a line and say, fuck if I know, on this aspect. I didn't exactly understand this piece of the game the first time, and even on a second playthrough, it's pretty confusing. Not a flaw of the game, just my own perspective. I would love to see your interpretations in the comments though. To note, the princess comes back every time. Even when she's hurt and battered, she still persists. I find that incredibly admirable. And trans, yeah. In the end, it truly is a love story about perseverance. Many trans stories in real life and in fiction end in heartbreak, and good endings like this one make me so hopeful. At any rate, Slay the Princess is an amazing story that can be seen through the lens of being trans. It's not perfect or maps on completely, but it's still compelling. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and like the video, all that good stuff.